Hello and welcome to another video. So today's video is going to be a bit different to my usual videos, and that's because I'm going to be debating bad reviews I found for The Way of Kings. So some of you know that I've been making many videos on the Stormlight Archive recently, and I've read the first two books and I liked them both and I really loved the second. And the books are mostly loved by everyone, so there's only a few people who don't love these books. And I thought it'd be fun to find those people, or well, find the reviews that people have left online, and to maybe make like a debate to kind of show my opinion on the matter, and to maybe see if I can see their point of view. So I'll go to the first review that I found, which was on Goodreads, which was a 2-star review, left by Evan Leach. Well, first off, this review talks about how this person feels like they're out of the loop and that they don't see why everyone loves the book so much. So I do kind of feel for this person, because I know the feeling of liking something that other people don't like, or not liking something that everyone seems to love. So I definitely feel that. So now I'll get into the points of why this person dislikes the book. So he says, a lot of the action/fighting scenes were pretty tedious. Not once in the book did I feel that any of the main characters were in any serious risk, which sucked away a lot of the dramatic tension. Okay, so about that, I agree that there's not much tension in the action scenes, but I don't think I agree with the fact that they were tedious, because one of my favorite things about these books is the action scenes, because I think they're so cool. I mean, let's carry on reading. Also, many of the characters were so much better equipped, more skilled, blessed with more uber magic than their hapless opponents, that the battles were just page after page of the Superman characters slaughtering hordes of luckless opponents. At times I felt I was reading the transcript of somebody playing a video game, a 1,000 pages transcript. Okay, so again, I don't necessarily think this person's wrong, because I do agree that a lot of the action scenes, especially the war scenes against the Parshendi pretty much, there's no tension with them, because we see the main characters killing about like hundreds of them in like a page. So it's not hard for them. So I have to say, there's not a single point in that first book where I thought any of the main characters were at risk or that they were going to die. Because I mean, once we saw Kaladin surviving against a high storm, I didn't think he would lose against the Parshendi while he's part of Bridge 4. I did think there was a risk of the people that he's with dying, which is good, because I cared about those characters and I didn't want to see Bridge 4 being killed. So I think it worked in that sense. But I do agree that a lot of the time in this book, the main characters are like Superman, and we just see them slaughtering up like hundreds and hundreds of opponents who don't have much skill at all. But here's the thing, even though that's true, I wouldn't say for me it's a flaw, because I think sometimes you can have action scenes where it's just to see how cool the magic system or the fighting skills of the characters are. For example, I mean, none of the MCU movies have, there's not a single moment in any of the MCU movies where I'm scared that one of the main characters is going to be killed. Maybe towards the end in Endgame or Infinity War, but in general, when we're seeing Iron Man fighting or we're seeing Captain America fighting, I'm not scared that the main characters are going to die. But that doesn't take away from the fact that those action scenes are just really cool to watch. You know what I mean? So in that sense, I do agree that this is not like Game of Thrones, where I'm terrified that Daenerys is going to be killed while she's in the battle, or when Jon Snow's fighting in the Battle of the Bastards, I'm terrified for his life. I think, oh my god, he's going to die. I don't feel that here, and I don't think I will feel that here that much, but it doesn't take away from the enjoyment for me. Okay, so let's go on to the next point. While Sanderson lays some good bricks here in terms of world building, I never really got hooked by the history of the universe he created, and I didn't get a great feel for what the world at large was really like, with the exception of a few locations like the Shattered Plains. So with that, I do agree that a lot of the world isn't shown to us, but I don't think that's necessarily a flaw you can have with this story, because Brandon Sanderson definitely has a plan in the making. You see that all these places exist, and you probably will eventually get to places. I mean, I've read the second book and I've seen him explore things that I didn't see explored in the first book, to the point where it felt like I was uncovering a brand new world. And I think that's the point. You don't get everything straight away with this first book, The Way of Kings. Brandon Sanderson very much gives you very little, but you know that he's got a lot in store for the future. So I would see why people would be frustrated. I mean, for me as well, I wasn't hooked with the world as much as in the first book as I was in the second book. But you just kind of have to trust Brandon Sanderson. Okay, so the third and final point is this. Finally, your mileage may vary, but the writing in this book drove me crazy. I haven't read anything else by Sanderson, so I don't know if this is just his style or if there was a failure in the editing process, but I found a lot of the dialogue in this book to be exhausting. Okay, so before I go into the examples of the dialogue that this person gives, I'll say that for me personally, the technical writing, the prose, is the weakest part of these books. But for me, it's never bad enough for me that I'm not into this. It takes me out of the story. There's maybe one or two scenes that happens in. For example, in Edged On, so there's a certain scene where a certain word's used, and I think that clashed with the tone of the scene. But I mean, that's kind of a nitpick as well. I don't think it's bad enough to take away from the story or the characters. But let's get into the example that this person has for the dialogue. So the first one is brightness. I believe you straight into sarcasm. Funny. I thought I'd run straight into it, screaming at the top of my lungs. I mean, I guess I wouldn't imagine people saying this in real life. I don't mind it because the tone of the world and the tone of this story, it doesn't make this dialogue bad. I mean, if this line was in something like, I don't know, Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, which have completely different tones and vibes to their stories, then it might seem weird. But these quotes to me so far are fitting into the tone that Brandon Sanderson builds for this world. So the next one is, I can see you are a woman of discriminating taste. I am. I do like my meals prepared very carefully, as my palate is quite delicate. Pardon, I meant that you have discriminating taste in books. Okay, yeah, that was not that great. I mean, when I first read it, I obviously didn't find it that bad because otherwise I would have remembered it. But I mean, reading it now, that's not the greatest quote I've read. But I mean, it's not terrible. So I think a lot of these ones are mainly for maybe Shallan's character because she's supposed to be the witty one and she has a lot of witty dialogue in this book. And I definitely remember that some of them were pretty funny, but not all of them were funny. Some of them I was like, okay, yeah, she's trying to be witty. She's not that funny. But there were a few that did make me laugh. But I guess that goes into personal taste. So listening to the points of this person who gave it 2 stars, by the way, if I didn't mention that already, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with them. I just feel like these points weren't as problematic for me while I was reading it. It didn't take away from my enjoyment of the books. But I can understand why it would take away from the enjoyment of other people. So I have no problems with this review. I mean, nothing in it made me mad. So the final thing the person says, I don't want to overstate my dislike for this book. I thought it was long, kind of sloppily written, and could be pretty boring at times. I can see people finding this book boring because there were definitely parts in the first maybe 3/4 of the book where I'm like, okay, this is a bit slow. I didn't know if we were going to get anything. But reaching the end of the book, I do feel like the ending kind of made the rest worthwhile. And if it didn't for some people, I guess that's just a matter of opinion then. But for me, it did. So the next review I'm going to be talking about is one from Amazon. Okay, so this person on Amazon whose name I've accidentally cut out, which you can probably find this review if you go on Amazon and sort by negative or controversial. So the first thing this person says is this book is mind-bogglingly bad. I can stomach the childish depiction of characters, but I cannot bring myself to accept the utter idiocy of the setting. Childish depiction of the characters. Let me just carry on reading. The opening is painfully bad. An all-powerful assassin kills a king and his guard by having superpowers taken straight out of video games. Okay, this is the second time video games are mentioned, and here's the thing. The first time I read that first chapter, first thing that came to my mind is this guy is definitely getting inspiration from a lot of video games. But for me, I also sometimes hear people say that these books are like D&D campaigns made into a 1,000-page book. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It doesn't have to, just because it reminds you of a video game, I don't think it makes it a bad story because yes, certain things from video games do hinder a story. With video games, I love video games. I actually want to make video games in the future, hopefully, if I ever get to do that. That's what I want to do because I believe that video games have the power to tell stories in a different way than books and movies and comics and even music. But the things that hinder a story in video games is the gameplay, where you have these huge portions of the game where you're having to kill a bunch of enemies. So I think that is what people are taking, because most basic story games, they have cutscene, they have you killing a bunch of enemies, and then you have a cutscene. And I think that can be a problem. But with video games, you're not getting any story out of the action. But I believe in this book, The Way of Kings, especially if I recall that first fight against the Chasm Fiend with Dalinar, Adolin, and Elokar. That fight, it was an action scene, and it was one where I feel like everything the characters did in those parts introduced us to who they were as a character. Dalinar, what he did, we learned a bit about who he was by the way he was fighting and what he was doing. Adolin and his views on his father, we learned from that. Elokar and how he wants to prove himself is shown in that as well. So I don't think just because there's a lot of action, I don't think that makes it similar to video games and how video games have a lot of action which takes away from the story. So I don't think that is a fair comparison, and I don't like it when people keep saying that just because it's like a video game it's bad, because you can tell a great story through gameplay as well. Okay, so the next part is about Kaladin, and he says, we are introduced to the hero who of course rejects the greatest conceivable honor in the world out of pure spite. He is then spared of his life out of sheer plot armor, and the reader is left wondering why he hasn't been killed for constant rebellion. His mates are all killed, but he survives because, oh, he's so special. I mean, here's the thing. You either get into the story or you don't. You either buy into the fact that Kaladin's this person, or you look at the fact that the writer's trying to write this person like that. So I feel for this person, when they were reading about Kaladin, they're probably thinking about how the writer wants us to feel about the character, and they're trying to make this character extra special by, he's the only one who's not killed and all that. But for me, I bought into I think enough was done with his character to make me feel empathy for him. I buy into the more fantasy or tropish aspects of his character when the rest of him kind of is up there, you know what I mean? But I can see people going into the book and clearly seeing these signs of what the writer's trying to do and only focus on that, and then not like Kaladin as a character. Okay, so the last point this person brings up is about the world building in general. So the first thing they say is the war in the Shattered Plains, about how they're supposed to be fighting this war against the Parshendi, but the humans have instead gone to fighting against Chasm Fiends to try and take the gem hearts. This person says that's stupid. So I kid you not, this is the primary purpose of the war, not beating the enemy, but killing the shrimps while they're pupating. This I do think is not a worthy complaint, I guess, because I feel like it's clearly shown in the book that these people are fighting this war, but the honor and the reason they were fighting this war is not as important to them as making money. So that not only seemed realistic to me, but I actually thought it was kind of good in also aiding to Dalinar's point of view, who's trying to get them to go back to task and try to fight the enemy. So in that sense, I think that was actually a good part of the book. I don't agree that that was bad, and I don't necessarily see this person explaining why that's bad. They're kind of just explaining what happens and saying is bad. Okay, so next up they talk about the idiocy never seems to finish. Soldiers with organic armor, illiterate kings with learned wives, even the regular storms that make magic. The hero, of course, discover magic that has been hidden in plain sight for countless years. In a specific kingdom, people live with feet constantly in 2 inches of water. In another, people eat horns and shells. For some reason, on a different planet, people know of Japanese carters. I could go on for hours. Avoid this book. So here I completely disagree. I don't think this person gave any point to why any of this is bad. They just pointed out a lot of the stuff that's in the world and a lot of the world building that Brandon Sanderson has done just to kind of illustrate his world in a way, and just saying it's bad for that fact and you should avoid this book just because this stuff happens. I don't think that's a valid point at all. I mean, I thought some of the stuff was cool. I thought it was pretty cool how there's a place where the water is almost constantly level. I mean, it doesn't really add any depth to the story, but imagining in your mind, it makes it a cool world. You know what I mean? When you think about this world visually, it becomes cool when you think about this kind of stuff. Yeah, so this person doesn't really give us any reason as to why these things are bad. So I don't think that's a valid point. Okay, so I've looked at 2 separate reviews, and the video is already turned really, really long. And the next review that I was saving for the end was one that I thought was a really, really well written review, and it's a really long one, and I thought I'd save that for the end because I thought it'd have the best points. But this video is already really long, so I don't want it to be too long. So I'm going to cut the video short now. I'm going to end the video now, and if you guys want and if you liked what this video was, I might make a part 2 of this video for that one specific review, because that could take an entire video of kind of dissecting that review and trying to come up with counter arguments to why I disagree or see why I would agree with what they say. So I actually enjoyed making this video. I thought it was pretty fun looking at these reviews and trying to debate them. I could make videos for Words of Radiance now that I've read that as well, or Edged On. So there's so many things I could make these videos on, debating bad reviews for. But yeah, so like the video if you liked it, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.